Hello and welcome everyone. Myself Mijanur Rahaman, and today my topic of discussion is transport of respiratory gases. So let us start. Today we will try to discuss about the introduction, then the transport of oxygen, then if possible, then we will try to discuss about the transport of carbon dioxide. Okay. So this will be our today's topic. So first of all, blood serves to transport the respiratory gases. Likely the oxygen is the most essential gas for the cells is transported from alveoli of lungs to the cells, and the carbon dioxide, which is the waste product of the cells, which is transported from cell to lungs. So first of all, blood serves to the transport of the respiratory gases, and in case of that, the oxygen, which is the essential for the cells, is transported from the alveoli of lungs to the cells, and carbon dioxide, which is the waste product of the cells, and it is transported from cells to the lungs. Now, transport of oxygen will start. First of all, the oxygen is transported from alveoli to the tissue by blood as in of two forms. One is as simple physical solution and in combination with hemoglobin. So these are the two methods by which the oxygen can be transported. So one is as simple physical solution and number two is in combination with hemoglobin. Now, partial pressure and content of oxygen in arterial blood and venous blood are given in the table. If you see that in case of oxygen, the partial pressure in case of arterial blood is 95, and in case of venous blood it is 40, and the content is in case of arterial blood it is 19%, and the venous blood it is 14%. And carbon dioxide, the partial pressure is arterial blood 40 and venous blood 45 to 46. Then the content of carbon dioxide is 48 ml percentage and 52 ml percentage in venous blood. Now, the two method, the first one, that is the as simple solution. The first one is oxygen dissolved in water of plasma and is transported in the physical form, and the amount of oxygen is transported in this way is very negligible. It is only 0.3 ml per 100 ml of the plasma, and it forms only about 3% of the total oxygen in the blood, and it is because of the poor solubility of oxygen in the water content of the plasma. Still, transport of oxygen in this form becomes important during this condition like muscular exercise to meet the excess demand of oxygen by the tissues. So it is an emergency condition. Whenever muscular exercise is occurring, then excess demand of oxygen can be supplied by the physical form or simple solution form. Now, in combination with hemoglobin, oxygen combines with the hemoglobin in the blood and is transported as oxyhemoglobin. Transport of oxygen in this form is important because the maximum amount, likely 97% of the total oxygen, is transported by this method. Now, first process, that is oxygenation of hemoglobin. Now, oxygen combines with the hemoglobin only as a physical combination. It is oxygenation and not oxidation. So, what is the difference between oxygenation and oxidation? So, that is the oxygen is transported to hemoglobin, not it is not making such bonds that it is integrated with hemoglobin. It is not integrated. It is just a carrier. Hemoglobin is just a carrier, nothing more than that. So, it is oxygenation of hemoglobin, not oxidation of hemoglobin. Now, this type of combination of oxygen with hemoglobin has got some advantages. Oxygen can be readily released from the hemoglobin when it is needed, and hemoglobin accepts all oxygen readily whenever the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood is more, and hemoglobin gives out oxygen whenever the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood is less. So what happens? Hemoglobin accepts oxygen readily whenever the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood is more, and hemoglobin gives out the oxygen whenever the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood is less. Now, the oxygen combines with the iron in hem part of the hemoglobin, and each molecule of hemoglobin contains 4 grams of iron. And iron is the hemoglobin that is present in the ferrous form. and each iron atom combines with one molecule of oxygen, and after combination the iron remains in ferrous form only, and that is the reason why the combination of oxygen with the hemoglobin is called oxygenation, not oxidation. So why the process is called oxygenation and why the process is not called oxidation? The answer is the oxygen combines with the iron in the hem part of the hemoglobin. Okay, and each molecule of hemoglobin contains 4 atoms of iron. And iron of the hemoglobin is present in the ferrous form, and each iron atom combines with one molecule of oxygen, and after combination the iron remains in ferrous form only, and that is the reason why the combination of oxygen with the hemoglobin is called oxygenation, not the oxidation. Now, oxygen carrying capacity of hemoglobin. The oxygen carrying capacity of hemoglobin is the amount of oxygen that is transported by 1 gram of hemoglobin, and the quantity is 1.34 ml per gram. So 1 gram of hemoglobin can carry 1.34 ml only. Now, oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. Oxygen carrying capacity of the blood refers to the normal amount of oxygen transported by blood. Normal hemoglobin content in the blood is 15 gram percentage, and since oxygen is carrying the capacity of hemoglobin is 1.34 ml per gram, the blood with 15 gram percent of hemoglobin should carry 20.1 ml percent of oxygen, like 20.1 ml of oxygen in 100 ml of blood. So we can say that 100 ml of blood can carry nearly about 20.1 ml or 20 ml of oxygen only. Now, but blood is with 15 gram percentage of hemoglobin carries only 19 ml percent oxygen. That is the 19 ml oxygen is carried to 100 ml of blood. Now, oxygen carrying capacity of blood is 19% because the hemoglobin is not fully saturated with oxygen. It is only saturated for about 95%. So what happens? In reality, whenever we calculate the 15 gram percent hemoglobin is carrying just and only 19 ml percent, but it should carry 21% of the hemoglobin oxygen. That is the if we calculate that 100 ml of the blood must carry 20.1 ml oxygen, but it is not carrying that much. It is carrying less than that. It is 19 ml only. So what is the reason that it is reduced? The reason behind this, that is the oxygen is saturated nearly about 95%, not 100%. That's why. So because of the hemoglobin is not fully saturated with the oxygen, it is saturated only for about 95%. This is the main reason. Now, saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen. Saturation of hemoglobin is a state or condition when hemoglobin is unable to hold or carry any more oxygen, and saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen depends upon the partial pressure of oxygen, and it is explained by oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. So what is oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve? Oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve is the curve that demonstrates the relationship between the partial pressure of oxygen and the percentage saturation of the hemoglobin with oxygen, and it explains the hemoglobin's affinity for the oxygen. Normally, in the blood, hemoglobin is saturated with oxygen only up to 95%. So the saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen depends upon the partial pressure of oxygen. When the partial pressure of oxygen is more, the hemoglobin accepts oxygen. When the partial pressure of oxygen is less, hemoglobin releases the oxygen. Now, method to plot the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. 10 flasks or tonometers are taken, and each one is filled with a known quantity of blood with known concentration of hemoglobin. Now, blood in each tonometer is exposed to oxygen at different partial pressures, and the tonometer is rotated at a constant temperature till the blood takes as much as of oxygen as it can. Now, then the blood is analyzed to measure the percentage saturation of the hemoglobin with oxygen. Now, partial pressure of oxygen and saturation of hemoglobin are plotted to obtain the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. So, what is the relation? That is, partial pressure of oxygen and saturation of hemoglobin are plotted to obtain the graph of oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. Now, normal oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, under normal condition, the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve is S-shaped or sigmoid shaped. And lower part of the curve is indicates the dissociation of oxygen from hemoglobin, and upper part of the curve indicates the uptake of oxygen by the hemoglobin, and depending upon the partial pressure of oxygen. So what it demonstrates, the lower part of the curve indicates the dissociation of oxygen from hemoglobin, and the upper part of the curve indicates the uptake of oxygen by the hemoglobin depending upon the partial pressure of oxygen. Now, what is P50? P50 is the partial pressure of oxygen at which hemoglobin saturation with the oxygen is 50%. And when the partial pressure of oxygen is 25 to 27 mmHg, the hemoglobin is saturated about 50%, and that is the blood contains 50% of oxygen at 40 mmHg partial pressure of oxygen. The saturation is 75%, and it becomes 95% when the partial pressure of oxygen is 100 mmHg. So what is the relation? P50 is the partial pressure of oxygen at which hemoglobin saturation is with oxygen is 50%. When the partial pressure of oxygen is 25 to 27 mmHg, the hemoglobin is saturated to about 50%, and when the blood contains 50% oxygen, and at 40 mmHg the partial pressure of oxygen is 75%, and it becomes 95% when the partial pressure of oxygen becomes 100 mmHg. So if we look at the curve, that is the normal curve, that is the P50, and it is shift to left and shift to right. We will discuss in the next point. And you can see the plotted graph between percentage saturation of hemoglobin and partial pressure of oxygen in mmHg. Now, factors which affect the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. Oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve is shifted to left or right by various factors. Shift to left indicates the acceptance or association of oxygen by the hemoglobin. So what is the shift to left? Shift to left indicates the acceptance or association of oxygen by hemoglobin, and shift to right indicates the dissociation of oxygen from the hemoglobin. Now, shift to right, what it indicates? Oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve is shifted to right in the following condition, like decrease in partial pressure of oxygen and decrease in partial pressure of carbon dioxide, which is known as Bohr effect. So what are the conditions? Decrease in partial pressure of oxygen, decrease in partial pressure of carbon dioxide. In both the increase in partial pressure of carbon dioxide, this is Bohr effect. So number 1, decrease in partial pressure of oxygen. Number 2, increase in partial pressure of carbon dioxide, that is known as Bohr effect. Now increase in hydrogen ion concentration and decrease in pH or acidity. Number 4, increase in body temperature, and number 5, that is excess of 2,3-diphosphoglycerate or DPG in RBC. It is also called 2,3-biphosphoglycerate BPG, and DPG is a byproduct of Embden-Meyerhof pathway of carbohydrate metabolism, and it combines with beta chains of hemoglobin and at conditions like muscular exercise and in high altitude. And the DPG increase in RBC, so the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve shift to right to a great extent. So what are the conditions when the curve shift to right? The conditions are, first one, that is decrease in partial pressure of oxygen, increase in partial pressure of carbon dioxide, increase in hydrogen ion concentration, decrease in pH or acidity, increase in body temperature. Number 5, excess of 2,3-diphosphoglycerate or DPG in RBC. It is also called 2,3-biphosphoglycerate, and DPG is a byproduct of Embden-Meyerhof pathway of carbohydrate metabolism, and it combines with the beta chains of the hemoglobin, and in conditions like muscular exercise and in high altitude the DPG increases in RBC, so the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve shift to right to a great extent. Now shift to left. Oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve is shifted to left in the following condition, like in fetal blood, because fetal hemoglobin has got more affinity to oxygen than adult hemoglobin. So in fetal blood. Then decrease in hydrogen ion concentration and increase in pH or alkalinity. Now the Bohr effect. Bohr effect is the effect by which the presence of carbon dioxide decreases the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen, and Bohr effect was postulated by Christian Bohr in 1904. 1904, and in their tissues, due to continuous metabolic activities, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is very high and the partial pressure of oxygen is very low. So Bohr effect is due to the this pressure gradient, the carbon dioxide enters the blood and oxygen is released from the blood to the tissues, and presence of carbon dioxide decrease the affinity of a hemoglobin for oxygen, and it enhances the further release of oxygen to the tissues, and oxygen dissociation curve is shifted to right. Now factors influencing Bohr effect. All the factors which shift the oxygen dissociation curve to right are enhance the Bohr effect. So what is Bohr effect? Bohr effect is nothing but the presence of carbon dioxide decreases the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen, which mainly occurs the dissociation of oxygen and association of carbon dioxide. So Bohr effect was postulated by Christian Bohr in 1904, and in the tissues, due to continuous metabolic activities, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is very high and the partial pressure of oxygen is low. And due to this pressure gradient, the carbon dioxide enters the blood and oxygen is released from the blood to the tissues, and presence of carbon dioxide decreases the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen, and it enhances further release of oxygen to the tissues, and oxygen dissociation curve is shifted to right side. Now what are the factors which affects the or influence the Bohr effect? Like the decrease in partial pressure of oxygen, then increase in partial pressure of carbon dioxide, increase in hydrogen ion concentration, decrease in pH, increase in body temperature, like this. These are the factors which influence Bohr effect. So this is our today's topic. We will discuss transport of carbon dioxide in the next video, and now we will summarize today's topic. First of all, we have discussed about the introduction part, that is blood serves to the transport of respiratory gases. Oxygen, which is essential for the cells, is transported from alveoli of lungs to the cells, and carbon dioxide, which is waste product in the cells, is transported from cells to lungs. Now transport of oxygen occurs by two methods. One is simple physical solution and one is combination with hemoglobin. So as simple physical solution, it is nearly about 0.3 ml, 3 ml per 100 ml of blood, and it is nearly about 3% of total oxygen which is supplied, and it is important because in case of muscular exercise, to meet the excess demand of oxygen, this method helps. Now in combination with hemoglobin, it is transported by oxyhemoglobin, and it is the maximum amount, that is 97% of the oxygen is transported by this method. First of all, oxygenation of hemoglobin, then we have discussed about the oxygen carrying capacity of the hemoglobin, then we have discussed saturation, then oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, and the factors that affects, and then we have discussed about the Bohr effect. So this is our today's topics. If you have any query or any doubt, you can comment down in the comment section. I will try to reply them all, and do like, share and subscribe to my channel for supporting me and my channel, and thank you so much for watching the entire video.